you are in the right place. And we are going to be talking about AI, both what's happening in the business side and the technology side. So if it's okay, let's just get started with a question, then we'll go around and introduce everybody and tell you a little bit about them. But Oleg, Clayton, when we were prepping for this, one of the things I think came up in our conversation, I'd love to get you guys to start riffing on. Um, a lot of companies think they could just hire a PhD and build an tool internally. With the AI frameworks changing literally every week, is build strategy just a vanity project and is going to be obsolete? Or is this a good strategy? How about Clayton? Why don't you dive in?
I think it depends on who's building. You can't you I, It is, I think, moving so fast, as we all know, that it's uh, you could hire someone who graduated from Stanford with a PhD in AI ML 5 years ago, and it doesn't necessarily correlate to their capability to build on the platforms today, just because it's moving so fast. And that might even be true 2 years ago. So it's more
Mhm.
about engagement with the emerging tech, with the major providers, with techniques, open source tech like model context protocol. There's all kinds of things where it's really democratizing the ability to build. So there are people who are doing vanity projects and hiring big teams headed by very impressive people who will be outpaced by single person startups or really good DevOps engineers who are early adopters of the tech. And so it's a wild west out there right now, and yet there's a lot of prestige to be gained by slapping the AI label on a product, as we all know. Um, so the proof is really in the pudding. If the tool can do what it says it can do, that's kind of the only way to gauge that, in my opinion.
Cool. So Oleg, you're a CTO. You do development projects for others, and you're the CTO of Insightful AI. What's your take on that? Do you think that internal teams could build their own tools, or should they be looking to external sort of established AI platforms for this?
I would say that internal teams can definitely build it, but should they? I guess nah. So ideally, it's changing so fast. I can even share an example. So we started to build one AI scientific project for a customer a year ago. Now it's on a final stage, and I spoke with an architect, and most of the tools we use there, they are outdated. And that's not like the incorrect choice or something like that. No, it's just really too dynamic. So I would encourage leaders to actually reuse all they can, and only if some specific requirements cannot be covered by tools, then turn in the internal team and build it.
That's wild. And so I'll introduced Oleg, but Clayton, could you give us just a quick hi to everybody and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I have been in the IT and consulting and advisory space for a decade, working in the Goldman Sachs portfolio companies. And then just about a year ago, I struck out on my own with a number of contractors and knowledge workers from my network to just understand this AI thing. And so I've been doing advisory and consulting work. I do a lot of like white labeled practice leadership for boutique consulting firms that maybe don't have that center of excellence or that capability in-house. They might bring me in, start a book of business, just understand how this tech works a little bit. And so I've been blessed in that regard to spend 8 to 10 hours a day, 5 to 6 days a week, playing with every tool imaginable and being able to expense it as a business expense. And one of the reasons I'm so attracted to this group and talking with Oleg and with you, Chip, and with Vu as well from the team is that I have tried to solve this specific problem of real-time diarized insights and plugging that into business intelligence for sales reps myself. And it's very exciting, it's very fun, but it's a tremendous amount of work. It's a really big problem out there. And Otter AI and Zoom and OpenAI have tools that kind of attempt this, but they don't do real time. And so just the achievement of the team what stood out to me as someone who plays in this space. And so anyway, that's me, and that's kind of why I'm here. I'm an impressed peer collaborator.
Well, yeah, but you have a lot of great insights and great experience too, especially with the Goldman Sachs portfolio. Just really quickly for everybody, my name is Chip Royce. I'm a fractional CRO and go-to-market strategist. I'm part of the Insightful team as an advisor, but I'm frankly working with a ton of companies in the B2B SaaS area who are either selling an AI tool or need to find ways to integrate this into their go-to-market and in their business operations. And I can say from just as a customer, this is a really, really tough decision for folks to make and to navigate. And so we're happy to get everybody here together for this event. Thank you for showing up. But we just want to, frankly, we're just going to sit up here and sort of compare notes. And please chime in with questions if you have them. We'd love to have you participate. But ultimately, we're here to talk a bit about what's going on the business side. How do business leaders make decisions around AI? And of course, give the technical take as well on what you need to be thinking about and just what we're seeing. So hopefully this is valuable to you. Um, so I'll toss it between. I'll let me back to go to Oleg. I mean, so Oleg, how are businesses going to budget for AI driven innovation if this technological foundation is going to shift all the time underneath them?
Yeah, that's a real issue because a lot of companies they just don't plan it. So they just plan some development, they estimate some features, and that's the budget. But that doesn't work like that. There are a lot of hidden costs, starting from tokens and ending with update of the platforms. Sometimes even if you're not even developing, you just need to have a budget for several tools to try every and select which is the best one because what you see on a description is not often the best for you. So you need to really try it, understand if it works for you or not. So that's really a tough one for companies.
So, and Clayton, what's your take?
Um, I think that model agnosticism is very important, by which I mean adopting platforms or selected tools, or even, if you're have a very strong technical capability, even approaches to software engineering that don't tie you down to a specific AI provider. So if you're like, let's say you're all in on OpenAI, and then a few months ago they came out with GPT-5, and it did really well at some things, agentic coding and codecs, and it did really a lot worse in one of the things that they were very good at for a long time, which is sort of
Oops.
the EQ relationship with a business user and non-technical user. And that just tanked all of a sudden. Well, what the heck? Okay, so now the ground is shifting, but you've tied yourself to a provider. So I think developing ways of working, and this is actually one of the really good use cases, I think, for platforms, whether it's Insightful or orgs like Glean or any of these like platform companies that offer enterprise wrappers for AI, is that if you should evaluate whether those platforms are themselves model agnostic. Do they let you switch models if needed? Is the
Oh, neat.
development
Yeah.
team, investing in multiple routes? And then, another key use case for that, of course, is like data sovereignty. If you're a company that needs like a HIPAA compliant solution, your platform, your provider, and your own architecture should be able to adopt the best solution. So just an example, it's just yesterday, Claude, which is kind of my favorite of the bunch at the moment, although Gemini 3 is becoming my favorite in the last 12 hours. But Claude, Claude announced, hey, we're on Azure as an endpoint now. And previously it was only OpenAI. And so you can access Claude through Azure, which allows you to have your own, instantiated instance. You can do HIPAA, you can do GRC a lot better. So just being aware of those dynamics, I think, is important because it lets you make decisions without tying yourself to a particular provider. And if they go under or they get leapfrogged, you're not missing out on whatever the newest capabilities are.
No, I completely agree. And as a consumer of many of these services, whether they're wrapper based or the core LLMs, I mean, it's it's almost paralyzing because you start, let's put it this way, I will not sign up for a long-term subscription for anything because I anticipate within 3 to 6 months, another vendor, if it doesn't have an absolutely unique breakthrough or frankly patented, protected method of doing something, I have to assume there's going to be a bigger, better tool. And so let's think about it, right? If you're the buyer in the enterprise, how do you make a decision and for what length of time? Maybe Oleg,
Yeah.
what's your thinking there, right? How does somebody pick a platform if things are that rapidly changing or develop their own internal app?
I would actually add one more thing. So
What's
you
that?
said that you will not subscribe for a year because it's like really dynamic. And I can add that the providers themselves, they actually doing the opposite. Like the months ago, Perplexity, they gave
Yeah.
away a year pro subscription just for free, a year subscription. But because that's the best way to actually link users to make them get used to your platform. And yeah, you just need to accept the loss, and that's the only way to enrich your audience. Yeah. And getting back to your question, so yeah, indeed, so it's really hard to make these decisions. There is a big variety of tools. I know big companies, they even hire a separate person actually just to investigate what's going on, what's tool are in there, are they work with us. So this person, he or she, not just like working with the tools. She goes to all the departments, try to investigate what are their flow and how can they integrate it. So yeah, it's like really dynamic and it's really full, a lot of noise in this market, and it's extremely hard to select the tool.
I would just
Clayton?
add though, I think one of the things that we're starting to see, and I have a guy who goes around to a lot of the tech conferences in the US and sends me notes back, which is very useful. And he's observed this as well, is that I think we're starting to get like really industry verticalized AI solutions
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
sub industries and use cases. And so like Insightful is an example of like, there's a starting use case, which is kind of the sales rep, the sales experience. And there's many other use cases for which this tool is incredibly applicable. Obviously, like real-time diarized transcripts with like sentiment analysis that connects to other data points and knowledge graphs, super useful for almost any type of knowledge worker who has a meeting of any kind, but for sales reps especially. And so you start to get these verticalized tools. I think that is also emerging. It's been kind of annoying and a little bit of snake oil up till now, but as the capabilities are growing, and we have to think about AI like any transformation, like agile and like cloud before that, where there's this long contrail, and the early adopters are simultaneously actually advanced and super hyped up and bubbly, right? And so uh, there's not a clear separation between those in the AI space yet, but as these industry verticalized solutions arise, that's actually a really good evaluator too, because then their feature roadmap will tend to be aligned with that industry or that persona or whatever it is. So you want to look for someone who's verticalized or use case specific in a way that aligns with your use case and that's model agnostic. And those would be two ways to triangulate, is there a platform that makes sense for me, even though there's this shifting capabilities layer and architecture layer underneath it. And
Yeah.
then again, you're still sort of crossing your fingers and hoping that they don't go out of business or that OpenAI doesn't just decide to do that tomorrow.
Yeah,
But if
there's
they're
there's always that,
verticalized and
Clayton.
they're
Yeah.
agnostic, they have a better chance.
I absolutely agree. And from anybody out there who's joining us on the business side, and for that matter, if they have their own software company, I can't, you know, suggest that you lean into this, as much as possible, right? And the reason is this: I mean, why are customers going to trust you? I mean, if you have a horizontal app or something that does everything for everyone, people will talk about AI fatigue. They'll talk about how am I going to use this? And it's going to be very difficult, as we've highlighted how difficult it is for people to make that investment come to the decision. The more work you do for them, however, right, not just a sales tool, but a sales tool like Insightful, which is for, as an example, it's for relationship salespeople with complex sales, right? So, okay, now that's much more specific to me. How are you doing that? And then if we can say, hey, we're going to make your real-time interactions valuable and not wait till after the call. Okay, now you got me. I hope that you can keep doing this, and established companies, good companies will be able to do so. But when you ask the customer, if I can give one bit of advice, if you ask the customer to do all that work for you and figure out how your tool will fit in their world, it's going to be a very, very difficult uphill sell to people. And that's probably a good segue. to both of you, are we seeing a strange meta loop where salespeople are struggling to explain the value of AI to their own customers because they haven't even adopted it in their own workflows?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's
So,
true of most knowledge workers in
yeah.
general, but the closer you get to DevOps, and not even just developers, by the way, but like specifically people who think about ways of developing software, not just writing code and memorizing syntax. The closer you get to DevOps and engineering management, the closer you're going to get to like the peak of early adopters right now.
Mm,
And then there's always one-offs around the world. But then the closer, the farther you get into um, just knowledge management, knowledge work in general, people who attend a lot of meetings, people whose work is digital, but not a fully digitized way of working. Um, I think that's the group that's farther away from a lot of these AI use cases. And we're talking about people who surely like use ChatGPT, maybe use Gemini or Claude or Grok or whatever it may be as like on a mobile app or on a desktop, but really integrating those capabilities into a workflow, into a way of working, into a tool stack, automating as much as possible, using that capability to not just generate new content or new ideas or summarize, but to actually streamline the workflow, reduce the friction, and make things faster without sacrificing quality. I think that salespeople are have a tremendous amount to gain, but are also farther away from some of the like technical concepts that people are, um, these groups, technical users are really primed to just embrace the existing
yeah.
technologies and start running. And business users like salespeople are further away from that. There's a higher barrier to entry.
Oleg, are you seeing on your projects sort of end user deployments versus sort of back office type applications and services?
Uh, I would say it's both. So indeed, as for AI usage itself, it really, as Clayton said, it need to be integrated into the workflow. Like a lot of business leaders I speak to, like I can ask, okay, are you using AI? Yes, I do. They usually use like note takers, for example. And then when you ask when the last time you actually saw the record, read the notes after the call, they said, I didn't. So in fact, they don't use AI. But for example, if I ask my clients from Insightful, they say, oh yeah, during my sales call, I saw this key hint from AI. I used it and it helped me to win the deal. So that's how it works. It really need to be integrated. It need to be visible, and then it helps.
Interesting. So let's get to that next step, right? So we've talked about philosophy, technology deployment, and the end user, but when we get to talking about organizations and actually making the purchase, right? Let me throw it to both of you. Who is the biggest cheerleader, and then who's the biggest blocker in organizations keeping people from moving forward with interesting business impactful what we believe to be interesting and impactful business AI deployments?
Well, I'll just offer my take is I think the biggest cheerleader is typically a manager, a senior director, somewhere in there. They are not so deep in the weeds day to day of the actual work that they can't get their head above water and look for process optimization opportunities. But so they're kind of the champions. They're looking for ways to improve velocity without sacrificing quality. And the blockers, and at least in my experience, is often procurement. It's, they're trained to audit the adoption of new technology and new platforms, licensing, statements of work and change orders to audit that based on very clear, um, industry proven
Mm-hmm.
outcomes that are just not suited for emerging tech. We're moving so fast that like, I mean, you should probably have case studies. You should understand
Yeah.
how your technology works. But some of the very hard and fast artifacts, take many, many more months to even generate than the technology takes to implement and start seeing value from. And so I see procurement as one of those ways that I would just love. This is a little side note, but my meta desire here, I would love to implement AI for some procurement person in a way that speeds up the procurement cycle itself, selfishly, so that I can get the emerging tech through their cycle a little bit faster. But that's
That's
my take.
funny. So one of the things on the business side of that I bring up with my customers is that difference between the vertical and horizontal we talked about. And because the procurement person is one of those people who are so deep in their industry and those certain requirements that are unique to either them or they're in healthcare, they're a regulated industry and they've got HIPAA and they've got all sorts of different pieces to there. And so, when people are building their go-to-market, that's actually a key thing that I think everybody's got to pay attention to. Having a generic page saying that we do X with AI is great, but it's a lot more impactful if you say we do X with AI for this industry to solve this problem. And you not only have the case studies, but you've got the feature set that are a requirement, what Dell we call ticket to entry in order to get in that organization and have that procurement person sign off. So when you've done that front legwork, you now are walking in speaking their language and saying, hey, Mr. Procurement, in advance, just want to let you know, here's all the requirements that we meet. Is there anything on here that we don't? And all of a sudden now you've made a friend as opposed to somebody who's a skeptic and who's, essentially set up to try to find a reason to reject you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's go to the next thing. So Clayton, you got your board of philosophy behind you that you told us about when we were
Oh,
prepping
yes.
here.
Yeah. Uh-huh. I do.
I think you said those are your things that you feel strongly about today, and one
My
of them
hot
was
takes. Yeah.
your hot take is death of rag. Um,
Yeah.
would you mind explaining that and diving in? Because I think a lot of people don't even know what rag is here because it's mostly business skewed.
Right. Okay. So RAG is retrieval augmented generation.
Okay.
If you think about when everything we're talking about, we talk about AI today is a specific type of AI called generative AI. In other words, it's not machine learning that analyzes statistical data and looks at like joint probability. You know, it's AI that generates new data that is like its training data. So that is generative AI. So ChatGPT, large language model,
Hmm.
diffusion models for images and videos, all generative AI. So
Yeah.
retrieval augmented generation refers to taking that process and injecting something that we went out to the library of knowledge and got, and we injected it in with your prompt. So you might send a prompt that says, hey, how do I solve this laptop problem? And then before we send it to the model to generate an answer, we're going out and retrieving a help desk article about that
Okay.
specific
Got it.
laptop
Got
and
it.
that company. So that's RAG. And a year ago, yeah, actually a little more than a year ago, a year and 2 weeks ago, it was that was the way to do it. It was this certain feedback loop. There was there's PyTorch and there's all sorts of very specific libraries and techniques to make RAG work. It was fairly intensive, and it involved hard coding scripts into the generation process for a large language model. And then Anthropic, is the company behind Claude,
Hmm.
in November last year, around this time, came out with something called the Model Context Protocol, which is also up on the board in the top right there. And they that was basically a way to say, hey, instead of injecting that retrieval before the prompt so that the user is sort of, or a script is intermediating between the user getting the stuff and then just sending it to the model. We are going to give the model itself the ability to retrieve that information because that generation, that text that ChatGPT spits out, it's text. Huh. We interact with computer systems through text. We write commands. Every time you click a little button in the UI of an application, it's actually an API request that's text that's going somewhere and coming back. And so this whole idea became, well, what if we just short circuited that and we let the model decide how to get that information itself? Model
Yeah.
context protocol. And this became widely adopted. So Gemini uses MCP. Model Context Protocol, OpenAI, Grok, believe it or not, behind the scenes, MCP, obviously the Anthropic system. So all these tools within 1 year completely adopted this approach. RAG still exists in a lot of legacy systems because, as I mentioned, it took a ton of work to stand up and scaffold and execute well. It was a sunk cost fallacy, ton of work. MCP is like a very quick standard for letting models do that. And so the death of RAG for me, and I checked that box. I guess I should half check it because I would say RAG is dying. Key example that I'll give, and then I'll turn the faucet off here, is Glean. You guys might know the company Glean, enterprise search kind of platform.
Yeah.
And this time, last year I was part of a Glean implementation initiative, and they were completely based on RAG. Their entire system was this very hard-coded, incredibly laborious system. And in order to retrieve all that, they had to actually copy all of these enterprise applications, all of their data into a digital twin. And so the large language model was here, the user and all of their business apps are up here talking to it. And then the user and all their business apps had to be copied into a structured database that Glean could talk to and get this information from. And that had to be synced regularly. So if you went and had a meeting with someone and then wanted to come talk to Glean about it and ask about context, it's not synced yet. And so it was very labor intensive. It cost a lot of money because you have to host all that data somewhere. You have to host all the
Yeah.
scripting. You have to pay all the developers who spend months and months on that roadmap. And then MCP comes and says, actually, you don't need any of that. You don't need a digital twin. You don't need to host anything. You don't need to do any of that. All you need is the models you're talking to need to be able to hit the APIs of those tools. And then whatever's in the source of record tools, the AI will just go get it. And Glean redesigns, and then they announced this like a couple months ago, redesigned their whole agent framework, their knowledge graph, their graph rag solutions, and the nesting of their graph rags around MCP. And I thought that was a very solid move. So the death of RAG to me, one of the biggest AI wrapper companies in the world that was built around RAG found it to be an existential threat and had to completely redesign and rework with all that non-recurring engineering around model context protocol. And so that to me was sort of the proof in the pudding of that theory that I wrote up there like almost a
Yeah.
year ago now.
Well, that's cool, and it's interesting. It sounds to me like there's some level of streamlining by switching to MCP. But I
Yeah.
read an article, and Oleg, I want to know your hot take on what you're seeing. But before there, I want to pose to you, Oleg. I read an article where someone was saying, perhaps some of these LLMs, if we talk about the energy usage and compute, token usage, et cetera, is to some extent overkill if you are trying to get something to, let's say, just analyze financial data and but act like a conversational LLM or what have you. Is there a business opportunity for people to deploy smaller, more specialized, learning models that don't require you going out to OpenAI or Anthropic or whatever, and be able to frankly do this cheaper, better, faster?
Yeah, definitely. So, first of all, the simplest approach is actually to switch even inside OpenAI or other provider to smaller, cheaper model, which requires less consumption, less execution processors, and etc. But indeed, there are like local installments like Llama, other competitors that you can use just some small server with video card usually, and that's where with small effort, small cost, you can actually start your own LLM and it will be working for you. You can fine tune it pretty easily. So you would still need a developer. But yeah, if your usage is pretty intense, then yeah, it definitely makes sense.
Awesome. And Oleg, do you have a hot take? So we had death of Rag. What's your hill that you would die on related to all of this?
Yeah, it's well, first of all, even if we not speak about MCP, it just indeed so dynamic. Like 2 years ago, no one knew about tracks. So that was something new, and that was really amazing. They changed the output, the quality so much, so significantly. And now we have another shift of the paradigm, and yeah, that's normal. I will not be uh, I guess like in a year from now or in a two, still MCP, we would be just thinking, oh, that was something a year ago. No one uses it anymore. It just indeed so dynamic, and a lot of money and a lot of effort are in this in AI space, so that's why it is so fast.
Interesting. By the way, I just want to open it up. We've got the webinar chat and excited to have everybody here. We've got plenty of questions that we can cover here, but we'd love to hear of any questions that you have. So please feel free to type in the chat any questions, and we will make every effort to get to it while we continue here. Um, so when we prepped for this, we said we wanted to have some fun and be meta about this. Um, so right now, as we speak, are there AI agents analyzing us? And if an AI were scoring this webinar panel in real time, what feedback would it be whispering in our ears right now?
That's a good question. Well, okay. So from my side, this speaks to the complexity of this, which is there's something called VAD, a voice activity detection, which
Yeah,
is a technique that distinguishes between the sound of, like, say, a voice, or like my toddler screaming in the other room, which I'm not sure if you guys can hear, or any other, like, door slamming or things like that. And in my system right now, this VAD system is encountering an error, and so it's just streaming to the OpenAI Whisper system a ton of untranslatable junk. And so when the OpenAI Whisper system gets that kind of noise back without VAD working, it translates into crazy hallucinated Cyrillic Russian text, or Hindu, or Urdu, or all these different languages. Sanskrit is the word I'm looking for. And so
yeah.
I've got this giant stream of gobbledygook, which again speaks to how, like, I I think it is very valuable to have a platform for these types of use cases, because while you can build it yourself, you're going to be relying on a lot of, like, local compute, a lot of libraries that can get out of date very quickly. It's a tremendous technical challenge to do diarized, especially diarized live transcripting. So I would show you mine, but it would be a Lovecraftian horror to see all the strange languages and code that's being translated from this webinar at the moment, which is
So
why I think
so
Insightful
yeah.
is a great solution.
Well, so Oleg, you built it, right? So what should it be doing right now?
Oh yeah. Well, first of all, it's not just so simple that it listens to you and that's it. So besides even like a lot of technical complexity, it still needs to understand you. It needs to understand your audience. That's what we said about vertical. So it really needs to know what you're doing, and then it will be able to come up not with some junk suggestion which are common and not relevant. So it will suggest you like really valuable things. And that's why, like, for example, in Insightful, we never even targeted to everyone. We start right now with several main areas. We target to specific salespeople because we know that we can actually help them really well. But yes, getting back to the technical stuff, it's too hard. So you need to not just transcribe, you need to understand who is talking, and you need to split all those streams. And yeah, it's tough. And you cannot just send everything to any LLM because that's ton of information, ton of processing. It's too general. So we do a lot of stuff to actually reduce that noise, to only work with the valuable information, to understand when is the moment when AI should jump in and actually help you, not just spam you with a lot of suggestion which you don't need to know.
That's awesome. Um, Again, folks, if you have any questions, please feel free to enter it into the chat. We've got another about 8 or 9 minutes left, and we can stay a little longer if you have questions. Haven't seen any yet, but we'd love to get involved. Um, but the last question I had for all of us, and in fact, I'll answer first because it'll be the least technical because I know the least about all this. But the question is this, right? If we convened this panel a year from now in November 2026, what current AI, themes, obsessions, fads will we look back on and laugh at? And what's going to be the new headline? Um, I'll jump in first. I think the thing we will have laughed at is how much we spent so much time on um, overthinking and trying to build prompts and use these things as we go through sort of our Neanderthal learning curve. And I think 2026, by this time next year, I think the idea of AI being a companion in our co-pilot is going to be absolutely natural. For instance, I bring a microphone with me and record and transcribe in-person meetings with clients. And they look at me funny when I ask, "Hey, is it okay if I do this?" They go, "What?" And I said, "Look, we transcribe everything when we get on Zoom. That's become a very valuable workflow. So I can stay in the moment, capture what's going on, and refer back to it later and know that I'm not going to miss anything. I'd like to be able to extend that to here." I think they're uncomfortable today, but I think a year from now, um, there's probably some really weird things that will come from realizing that we're being recorded 24/7 and some of that's in the cloud. But I think it's going to be really natural because these tools are going to help us, hey, what was that movie somebody mentioned the other day, and be able to recall it, augment our memory, and frankly, hopefully be more productive and not let our brain cells atrophy. So that's my take. Oleg, what's yours? What do you think in 2026 will be the thing we're going to laugh at and think it will be the new big thing we'll be focused on?
Yeah, I would say that we will be laughing that, oh my God, I was really scared that AI will take my job. But instead, I would be just like, wow, it is helping so much. I don't need to do this boring stuff anymore. And the same like with Insightful. So I expect like salesman says, oh my God, I would lose those deals a year ago. And now when AI jump in and help me with the flow with my customer, now I have this deal, so we are successful right now. Then that's my expectation.
Clayton, how about you, man?
I would say probably within a year, we will look back on the term agentic AI, and sort of laugh and say we didn't really know what that meant. Um, because or maybe the word agent would be a better, we have agent this and agent that, and the vast majority of those right now in 2025, the vast majority of agents are just a hard-coded system prompt and some knowledge base. But even today, like even the stuff that you can do with Claude Code today, if you pay $200 a month, you have your max plan. It goes far, far, almost unimaginably far beyond what most of the world called agents today, as far as
Yeah.
using tools, transcending systems, going out and gaining access to systems. I mean, Anthropic just uncovered the first major cyber, security attack from a Chinese Communist Party funded group using Claude Code. And it
No
targeted
way.
50 different enterprises. This was a few weeks back that they, released the information. So I think that our concept of agentic, we were promised that 2025 is going to be the year of the agent. But so far, I haven't really seen what I would call agentic AI, which is tools using autonomous planning AI. We kind of just see chatbots with another layer of prompting and knowledge
Yeah.
attached to them, but really autonomous AI that is integratable in a workflow across tools. I think that has yet to appear, and we will laugh because that's what agentic AI really refers to, tech as a term, but we've been using the term to refer to much simpler implementations for this year so far.
Excellent. Excellent. And guess we have a question. Um, from Bill. He asks, as a CRO, what are the key things that bring value? And what are the biggest obstacles or questions you have to a purchase that's AI driven? Um, Bill, I think you're asking, if we're in the CRO's seat, what we're thinking there. And I think that's an interesting challenge, right? And I think we touched on this early on. Maybe it was Oleg, right? the things the salesperson want isn't necessarily the things that the executive wants. And I think that's a major disconnect, right? How do you harmonize what tools the marketer, salesperson, analyst, or whatever use that also is felt like a worthwhile investment that has longevity to the org that you get from the VP or higher seat. Um, and I find it interesting, but I think my first thing I'll throw in, and I want Clayton and Oleg to chime in, is um, I think the biggest obstacle is the executives themselves. And I think your biggest adherents and people willing to experiment are the folks in the trenches, because ultimately, if you are actually giving them tools to make their jobs better and they're semi optional to them, meaning feel free to lean in as much as you want, I think you're going to see the productivity gains and productivity, whether it's as an analyst, whether it's a data wrangler, or as a salesperson. Um, you know, you're going to start collecting data to see, hey, this thing is making a difference for certain people, and that creates your own internal case study to either move a different direction or um, push for adoption. Because if a salesperson is selling more, their commissions are going higher, they're happy. And I think we just need to align with those kind of outcomes. Oleg, what about you? Any thoughts there?
Yeah, so indeed, a lot depends on a person because some people they are just afraid to break anything. They do not innovate, and that's why they don't have any changes. Other people, they might do the opposite. So they see a lot of tools, they expect them to help a lot. They start implementing it and they actually break everything. So they spend budgets on these tools, they break the process, so having the less revenue, and that's indeed an issue. Usually, I would say that indeed you just need to localize your real pain, your problem, and start actually investing there. That's where you can invest like not too much money, see the outcome immediately, and that's where you can actually play with the revenue, so it will increase for you.
Clayton?
Yeah, I think Bill, you asked about what are the things that bring value and then what are the biggest obstacles. I actually think the number one item on both sides is really the same thing, actually, which is the effect or outcome, a better word would be the chain reaction of a pilot. So you do like because I think that's the thing to realize that a lot of orgs are starting to wise up to after we've been in this like whole pilot MVP phase and we're starting to productionize these things across the
Yeah.
industries. I think a lot of people are starting to realize that a pilot of such a disruptive capability, it does not just affect the business unit or the department or the team to which it was deployed. It affects all the connecting pieces. So a good example would be like an Insightful, an AI that like is supposed to diarize and log a call and let's say enrich or integrate with CRM data. So if an AI does that correctly and it does it really well, then suddenly my CRM data is also reliably clean. Yes, it helps people like the immediate problem of like a rep in the middle of a call, understanding, gaining insight, keeping people engaged, warmer leads for that individual rep or that sales team or product or SKU. That's great. But also there's this chain reaction where suddenly a database that has been plagued with inconsistent data, is not kept up to date, can be consistent, can be kept up to date, can be clean data. So now forecasting is more accurate too. So now we're bridging from one part of the revenue business unit, which is the sales, to sales operations, to the true revenue group, the forecasting, right? And then that has other implications. So one little thing can impact other things positively, but it can also impact things negatively because if your AI incorrectly diarizes and
Yeah.
incorrectly logs, then suddenly your CRM data is even dirtier and your forecasting is even harder. And so I think the thing that brings value and the thing that is an obstacle is kind of the same thing, which is the outcomes. I think this is why it's very important. And I have an article on my website that I wrote a few months ago about this concept of the chain reaction. Just like a nuclear chain reaction, it's like if you harness it, if you channel it correctly it produces sustainable fusion. That fission produces fusion. You can sustain the chain reaction. There's a tremendous energy because you're controlling the effect of that fission. But if you're not controlling it, if you're not picking your pilot, understanding the chain reaction, sustaining it, then that particular type of nuclear energy release is obviously extremely destructive. The same capability of generative AI can really help and accelerate and produce a lot of energy within an organization and momentum, but it could also tear the organization apart very quickly because it is such a disruptive emergent technology. So I would, from my perspective, I think that as kind of the same thing.
Absolutely. Any other questions from the group before we wind up? Love to cover it. Well, let me tell you, well, just before we see if there's any other questions come in, first of all, love to thank Oleg and Clayton for joining us today. You guys are fantastic, really great brains, and really appreciate all the insights that you had today. Just to let everybody know, we're going to send an email out after this. It's going to have a link to the recording so you can go back and digest all of these big ideas that have been thrown out. We're also going to include contact information for everybody in case you want to reach out to myself, Clayton, or Oleg. You'll know where to do that. And Clayton, if it's okay, I'd love to also include a link to that article so that everybody can get that and
Yeah,
get a chance to dive
absolutely.
in.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I think that's it. Again, thank you for
Chip,
everybody who's joined us today. Yeah, Oleg.
sorry, there is a question from Wu. What is the one assumption the industry still believes that you think will prove false in the next 12 to 18 months? So I would like to cover it a little bit. So uh,
Sure.
partially, I would say. So there is one assumption. It's not for the industry, but many people says about sales that still sales are done with people, not by tools, not by anything, but people. And that is actually true. But I would say that in future, sales would be done with people powered by tools. Uh, Person, the salesman with a correct tool, which is actually tailored for him, he will do much better in sales and he will close much more deals.
Yeah, I would add my answer to that same question is exactly what Oleg said, but just transcended beyond sales. I think people are thinking in binary terms. Either it's humans doing the work or it's AI doing the work. And I was part of a roundtable on AI in the academy at a Cal State University over here in LA, and it was completely binary. We had a visual effects artist who
Yeah.
was there who took the mic. A very angry person. He worked on Game of Thrones, did like dragons and all this stuff, and was talking about how these diffusion models were copying his work. And I felt very conflicted because I understand the baseline understanding of the capability is not there. Doesn't mean that the dynamic he's experiencing in the market is not there. He was
Mhm.
there at a college because he got laid off from his visual effects degree and he's trying to do a career change. So the dynamic was absolutely there. His understanding of the capabilities and what was actually happening was completely inaccurate to the technological reality. So I think the key change that we can effect in our thinking that will affect the market because the market is people thinking about things and acting on their thinking is to move past this binary distinction between it's either a human doing the work or the AI doing the work for them and think in terms of collaboration. You have to think of AI as a tool, think of your work as an outcome that is aided by tools, and now you have another maybe disproportionately powerful tool in the tool belt. So how do we improve the outcomes? And with that thought, that
Yeah,
is a
yeah.
missing assumption in the current
I,
state.
I would agree. I think that people misuse it if they expect it to do the work for them. But when they look at it as augmentation, sort of think of your exoskeleton that makes you stronger and faster and better. Um, yeah, there are some people who don't know what they're doing. And yeah, I think AI tools are going to take them from being, you know, unable to do their job to doing something like sales okay. But it's really about upskilling. Hey, and so thank you, Sean. We got another question. So let me throw this in here to the panel. Do you see more and more companies providing AI solutions? Meaning, are we going to get 10,000 options to do X? Or are we going to see the variety tighten up? into more focused, maybe larger, but hyper focused companies that that are going to sort of own the space here.
My take, and nice to see you, Sean. It's been a while. My take is I think that you're going to see a division between the pick, today, when we talk about the picks and shovels business in AI, we have so far been talking about like NVIDIA, AMD, chips, infrastructure is another
Yeah.
layer closer to the user, like AWS, Bedrock, Azure. I think the actual AI capabilities, we're going to see a lot of consolidation. So there's the
Hmm.
Gemini, companies like Perplexity that are not the S tier AI provider, but they're useful. There's a lot of users. I think we'll see a lot of consolidation there. We'll start to see like Gemini DeepMind becoming this big beefy lab with lots of scientists. They're going to draw in. There's going to be a brain drain of the lower level, but still like genuinely useful capabilities. So I think at that level of like the capabilities builders, the labs, the people who are
Hmm.
building new large language models, the frontier work, they're not doing the chips, the pure compute, but they're partnering with them to build these capabilities. That will consolidate, I think, over the 5 years. It'll be a totally different world, I think, 5 years from now. I think the like product companies will continue to diversify built on those platforms like crazy, like wildfire. So yes to both. I think there will be 10,000 options to choose from for product companies, and there will probably be like four options to choose from for those product companies to build upon.
Oleg, how about you?
Yeah, I would say it would be like somewhere in the middle because from one side, the big companies, big providers, they have so much resources, they are so powerful, and they are capable of actually, with the help of AI, optimize their processes so much that it's just the time when they never had so much spared resources. So they build whatever they want. At the same time, they don't wanna like go uh, narrow to some specific stuff, and that's why a lot of tools still would be appearing. The issue here is that from those 10,000 options, 9,000 would be still born from beginning. But the other thousand, they will be developed and they will gain their customer and they will still do their job a bit better than big companies.
Mhm.
I'd agree. I'd agree. And I think at the end of the day, again, if you're a contractor and you're looking for an application that helps me be a better contractor, you need to know what it's like being a home contractor versus a large building contractor versus Home Depot. And too many industries think, oh, I'm just going to go horizontal and I'll handle the building industry and I got that and I'm going to dominate, and that often doesn't work. So hopefully that's helpful to you, Sean. Any other questions before we get rolling out of here? We can't thank everybody enough for their time and the panelists for their time. It's been an awesome conversation. So again, just to quickly reiterate, we're going to get an email out to everybody. The details will be there, but and the recording, of course. But thank you everybody for joining us. Thanks to Insightful for hosting this, and thank you for Clayton and Oleg for sharing their time. We really appreciate it.
Yep, likewise. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you and thanks, audience.